The Corvathian Death's shadow moved through space like a dark storm cloud. The massive ship was over a kilometer long and covered in weapons that could destroy entire cities. Its black metal surface reflected no light, making it look like a hole in space itself. Behind it followed 3 smaller destroyer ships, each one powerful enough to conquer most worlds. Commander Zarthak stood on the bridge, his yellow reptilian eyes fixed on the blue planet ahead. His scales were dark green with scars from many battles across his chest and arms. He had conquered 17 worlds in his 30 years of service to the Draconian Empire. Earth would be number 18. "Sir, we are entering their solar system," reported his second officer, a younger Draconian with bright red scales. "Their primitive satellites are trying to scan us." Zarthak made a sound that was the Draconian version of laughter. It sounded like rocks grinding together. "Let them look. Soon they will see nothing but fire." The bridge was filled with the sound of computers and the breathing of his crew. 40 Draconians worked at various stations, all of them veterans of conquest. The air smelled of metal and the special oils they used to keep their scales healthy in space. "Destroy their satellites," Zarthak ordered. "All of them." Bright beams of energy shot out from the Death's shadow. In seconds, every human satellite around Earth was gone. The 3 destroyer ships spread out to cover different parts of the planet. Everything was going exactly as planned. The Draconians had ruled much of the galaxy for 300 years. They were strong, smart, and completely without mercy. When a world refused to pay tribute to the Empire, the Draconians would arrive and make an example that other worlds would remember. Earth had refused to pay tribute 3 times. Now they would pay a different price. "Sir, we are receiving surrender messages from the planet," the communications officer reported. "Multiple governments are trying to contact us." "Ignore them," Zarthak said. "Our orders are clear. Total subjugation through overwhelming force, no negotiations." He looked at the planet below. It was beautiful in a way that reminded him of his home world before the wars. Blue oceans, white clouds, green and brown land. Soon much of it would be black ash. The thought did not bother him. He had burned prettier worlds than this one. But then something strange happened. A small red light appeared on his command screen. "Sir, I am getting a minor error in the navigation system," reported the ship's engineer. It corrected itself, but it was odd. Zarthak frowned. The Death's Shadow was the newest ship in the fleet. Its technology was perfect. "Run a full diagnostic." "Yes, sir." More small problems appeared over the next hour. The communication array developed static. The weapon targeting systems flickered for a few seconds. The artificial gravity fluctuated just enough to make a few crew members stumble. "Engineering report," Zarthak demanded. "Sir, all systems show normal operation. These appear to be random glitches, perhaps electromagnetic interference from the planet below. Some primitive worlds have unusual magnetic fields." Zarthak accepted this explanation. He had seen similar problems before on backward planets. Their crude technology sometimes interfered with advanced systems in small ways. It was nothing to worry about. Across the galaxy, other species watched through long-range sensors and hyperspace communications. The Draconian Empire had never lost a battle, never failed to conquer a world. They set out to destroy. The betting pools on various worlds were not about whether Earth would fall, but how quickly it would happen. The Zentaurians, a peaceful trading species, sent messages to their colonies to prepare for new refugees from Earth. The Vorthon Republic quietly moved their merchant ships away from human trade routes, knowing they would soon be empty of life. The Crystalline Collective simply watched and recorded, as they always did. "Sir, we are ready to begin atmospheric entry," the pilot announced. "Take us down," Zarthak ordered. "Full power descent. I want every human on this planet to see us coming." The great ship began to move toward Earth's atmosphere. Its shields glowed as it prepared to enter the planet's air. This was always Zarthak's favorite part of a conquest, the moment when the enemy saw their doom approaching and knew there was no escape. But the navigation error appeared again, then again. The weapon systems flickered twice in rapid succession. The artificial gravity hiccuped, making several crew members grab onto their stations. "Sir, the problems are getting worse," the engineer reported. "I still cannot find the source." Keep working on it, Zarthak growled. We proceed as planned. The Death's shadow entered Earth's atmosphere with a roar of fire. Its heat shields glowed bright orange as it pushed through the air. Below, humans in their cities looked up and saw death approaching. At least, that was what was supposed to happen. Instead, something very different began to occur. The ship's anti-gravity systems started to malfunction. The careful descent became rough and unpredictable. Warning lights appeared all over the bridge. The great ship lurched to one side, then the other. "Sir, we are losing altitude control," the pilot shouted. "The anti-gravity generators are failing." "Impossible!" Zarthak roared. "Those systems are brand new!" "Sir, I am reading cascade failures across multiple systems," the engineer reported, his voice tight with fear. "Life support is stable, but navigation, weapons, and propulsion are all showing critical errors." The Death's shadow was falling out of the sky. Zarthak watched in horror as his perfect ship, the pride of the Draconian fleet, plunged toward the surface of Earth like a stone. The pilot fought to control their descent, but the ship would not obey. "Emergency landing procedures," Zarthak ordered. "All crew, prepare for crash landing." The massive ship hit the ground in a rural area north of a human city. It carved a deep furrow through forests and farmland, destroying everything in its path for 5 miles before finally coming to rest in a smoking crater of torn earth and broken trees. Alarms wailed throughout the ship. Emergency lights flashed red. Zarthak picked himself up from the floor, his head bleeding from where he had struck his command chair. "Damage report!" he demanded. "Sir, the ship is intact, but we cannot take off," the engineer replied. "Multiple systems are completely offline. It will take weeks to repair, maybe longer." Zarthak felt something he had not experienced in many years: uncertainty. How could the most advanced ship in the galaxy simply fall out of the sky? What kind of weapon could cause such complete system failure without being detected? "Sir, the destroyer ships are reporting similar problems," the communications officer said. "They are requesting permission to land for emergency repairs." "Granted," Zarthak said through gritted teeth. His perfect conquest had become a disaster in the span of an hour. Outside the ship, human vehicles began to appear. Police cars, military, trucks, and strange civilian vehicles that Zarthak did not recognize. But they did not attack. They simply surrounded the crash site at a distance and waited. Zarthak had conquered 17 worlds, but he had never seen anything like this. The humans were not running in terror. They were not launching desperate attacks. They were just watching and waiting. Something was very wrong on this planet. Something that made his advanced technology fail and his perfect plans crumble. But Zarthak was a veteran warrior. He would figure out what was happening and complete his mission. He had no idea that his real problems were just beginning. 3 hours after the crash, Zarthak finally left his ship to see the damage for himself. The Death's shadow looked terrible. Its black metal hull was cracked in dozens of places. The main engines were buried under tons of dirt and broken trees. The landing had destroyed the ship's beautiful, fearsome appearance and left it looking like a wounded animal. 50,000 Draconian soldiers had already set up a defensive perimeter around the crash site. They carried plasma rifles and wore full battle armor. Their training was perfect, their discipline absolute. These soldiers had conquered worlds and destroyed cities. But as Zarthak walked among them, he noticed something odd. The soldiers kept looking toward the human vehicles gathered at the edge of their perimeter, not with anger or preparation for battle, but with curiosity. Some of them were actually pointing at the strange human contraptions and talking quietly among themselves. "What are those?" asked one soldier, pointing at a line of colorful trucks. "I think they are selling food," replied another. "Look, humans are giving other humans small objects and receiving something in return." Zarthak followed their gaze and saw something that made no sense. The humans had not fled in terror. Instead, they had turned his crash site into some kind of gathering. There were trucks selling food, tents being set up, and humans arriving in large numbers. Children played games while adults sat in folding chairs and watched his ship like it was entertainment. "Sir," his communications officer approached him, "the human governments are still trying to contact us. They say they want to help with rescue and medical assistance." "Help?" Zarthak's voice was full of confusion. "We are invading their world. Why would they want to help?" I do not understand it either, sir, but they have medical vehicles standing by and something called engineers who want to look at our ship. This made no sense. In Zarthak's experience, conquered species either fought to the death or cowered in terror. They did not offer medical help and engineering advice to their conquerors. Sir, another officer came running up. The destroyer Flame of Conquest has been forced to land in a place called Kansas. The Blood Drinker went down in something called Texas. Both report the same system failures we experienced. Zarthak felt his stomach drop. 3 of the most advanced ships in the galaxy had all fallen out of the sky within hours of reaching this primitive planet. This was not a coincidence or random equipment failure. This was something else entirely. Have they encountered resistance? He asked. No, sir. The opposite, actually. The humans in both locations are helping them too. Before Zarthak could respond, a small human vehicle approached the perimeter. It was white with red symbols on it and made a strange wailing noise. His soldiers raised their weapons, but the vehicle stopped just outside their defensive line. 2 humans got out. They wore white clothes and carried bags of equipment. One was an older male with gray hair, the other a younger female with dark skin. They held their hands up to show they were not armed. "Hello!" the older human called out in the common galactic language. "We are doctors! We heard you had a crash and thought you might need medical help." Zarthak stared at them. These 2 small, fragile beings had voluntarily approached 50,000 armed alien soldiers to offer medical assistance. It was the bravest and most foolish thing he had ever seen. "We brought supplies for different types of biology," the female human added. "We do not know what you need, but we want to help." One of his soldiers stepped forward. "Sir, Private Kethvar was injured in the crash. The medical bay is not working properly." Zarthak looked at the 2 humans, then at his injured soldier, then back at the humans. Every instinct told him this was a trick. But what kind of trick involved 2 unarmed medical personnel walking up to an army? "Let them approach," he finally said. The 2 humans came forward with their medical bags. They moved slowly and kept talking in calm voices. The female human knelt beside the injured Draconian soldier and began examining his wounds with gentle hands. "This looks painful," she said, "but not too serious. We can help with this." As the human doctors worked on his soldier, more humans arrived at the perimeter, but not soldiers or weapons. Instead, there were people carrying food, water, blankets, and strange devices that seemed to generate electricity. An elderly human woman approached with a large pot of something that smelled wonderful. "I thought you boys might be hungry after your rough landing," she said. "I made soup. It is vegetable-based, so it should be safe for most species." Zarthak watched in complete bewilderment as his fearsome invasion force was offered soup by a grandmother. More humans arrived throughout the day. Mechanics who wanted to look at their technology and maybe help with repairs. Teachers who were curious about Draconian culture. Children who sold cold drinks and asked if they could see inside the spaceship. By evening, the crash site looked nothing like a military operation. It looked like a festival. Humans had set up a camp nearby with portable toilets, medical stations, and something called Wi-Fi. The sounds of human laughter mixed with the deeper voices of Draconian soldiers trying to communicate. "Sir," his second officer approached him. "Several of our soldiers are asking permission to accept human food offerings. They say the medical scans show it is safe for our biology." "And?" Zarthak asked. "And they say it tastes better than our military rations." Zarthak rubbed his temples. He had a growing headache that had nothing to do with the crash. "What about the ship repairs?" "That is complicated, sir. Every time our engineers fix something, it breaks again within hours. But the human engineers have some interesting suggestions. They seem to understand our technology better than expected." "How is that possible?" "I do not know, sir. But one human suggested that our quantum flux inverters might be experiencing cascade resonance failure. That is exactly what our diagnostics showed, but we had not told them about it." As night fell, portable lights illuminated the area around the crash site. The humans had brought generators to power everything. Some of the younger human children had fallen asleep in their parents' arms while watching the alien spaceship. Several Draconian soldiers sat nearby, sharing their own stories of home worlds and battles. Zarthak found himself talking to the elderly woman who had brought soup. Her name was Martha, and she had lived in this area for 70 years. She treated him like a neighbor who had car trouble, not a conqueror from space. "You know," she said, sitting in her folding chair and knitting something colorful. "We had a tornado come through here 5 years ago, destroyed half the county. But folks came from everywhere to help. That is what people do when someone is in trouble." "We are not in trouble," Zarthak said. "We are invading your world." Martha looked at him over her knitting needles. "Honey, you crashed your spaceship in a cornfield and your boys are asking for directions to the bathroom. That is not an invasion. That is a really bad day that needs some fixing." For the first time in his life, Commander Zarthak had no idea what to say to that. Above them, the stars shone down on the strangest military situation in galactic history. The mighty Draconian invasion force was being treated like guests at a neighborhood barbecue, and somehow, that felt more dangerous than any weapon they had ever faced. 2 weeks had passed since the crash, and Zarthak's situation had become increasingly strange. His ship was still broken. Every repair attempt failed within hours. Replacement parts that should last for centuries stopped working after a single day. The engineering teams were baffled and frustrated, but that was not the strangest part. The strangest part was what was happening to his soldiers. Private Kethvar, the soldier who had been injured in the crash, now spent his free time helping a local farmer named Joe with his corn harvest. The private claimed it was good physical training, but Zarthak had seen him laughing with the human children who rode on the farming machines. Sergeant Mordak had learned to play something called baseball with the local humans. He was surprisingly good at hitting the ball with a stick, though he had accidentally broken 3 bats with his enhanced strength. The humans just brought him a stronger bat and taught him to be more careful. Lieutenant Vexara had discovered human music and spent hours listening to something called country songs on a device given to her by a teenage human girl. She claimed she was studying human culture for intelligence purposes, but Zarthak had heard her humming the melodies. This was not how invasions were supposed to work. "Sir, we have a problem," his communications officer reported during the morning briefing. "Command wants a status update. They are asking when we will complete the subjugation of Earth." Zarthak looked around his temporary command center, which was actually a large tent that the humans had provided when his ship's command deck lost power. Through the tent opening, he could see several of his soldiers helping humans set up something called a county fair. "Tell command that we are conducting extended intelligence gathering on human defensive capabilities," he said. "Sir, respectfully, what defensive capabilities? They brought us soup." That was the problem. In 2 weeks on Earth, Zarthak had not encountered a single weapon that could threaten his forces. No energy shields, no plasma cannons, no quantum torpedoes. The humans had primitive kinetic weapons that could barely scratch Draconian armor. Yet somehow, his entire invasion force was completely neutralized. "Sir!" Another officer burst into the tent. "The Flame of Conquest is reporting that their crew has been invited to something called a barbecue festival. Captain Hergax wants to know if attendance is permitted for cultural research purposes." Zarthak closed his eyes and counted to 10 in the old Draconian way. When he opened them, the problem was still there. "Permission granted," he said. "But maintain full security. Protocols, yes, sir. Also, the Blood Drinker reports that their crew has learned to operate human farming equipment and has been helping with the local harvest. Captain Zilmoth says his soldiers have never been in better physical condition." This was madness. 3 of the most feared ships in the galaxy had been turned into agricultural assistance programs. Later that day, Zarthak walked through what the humans called the Crash Site Village. It had grown considerably since the first day. There were permanent buildings now, roads, power lines, and even a small school where human children learned alongside young Draconian soldiers who were studying human educational techniques. He found Martha, the elderly human woman who had first offered him soup, sitting in her usual spot under a large tree. She was teaching a group of Draconian soldiers how to knit. "Hello, Zarthak," she said without looking up from her needles. "How are you doing today, dear?" "I am confused," he admitted, sitting down beside her. This had become a daily routine, though he was not sure how it had started. "About what?" "Your people. Your world. Everything." He watched as Sergeant Mordak carefully worked on what appeared to be a green sweater. "We came here to conquer you, to destroy your cities and enslave your population. But instead, you give us food and teach us crafts. Martha nodded. That sounds about right. But why? Do you not understand what we are? What we have done to other worlds? Oh, I understand perfectly, Martha said. You are soldiers from space who have done terrible things, because that is what soldiers sometimes have to do. But you are not doing terrible things now. Right now, you are just people who are far from home and having a bad time with your spaceship. We are not people. We are Draconians. We are conquerors. Honey, Martha said, looking at him with the patient expression she used on confused children, people are not what they are born as. People are what they choose to be. And right now, you are choosing to sit under a tree and talk to an old woman about knitting. That makes you a person in my book. That afternoon, Dr. Sarah Chen arrived from something called MIT. She was a small, human woman with intelligent eyes and graying hair. She carried strange devices and asked permission to study the Draconian technology failures. I think I might know what is happening to your ships, she told Zarthak. But you are not going to like the explanation. They walked to the Death's Shadow together. The great ship looked even worse than before. Vegetation was starting to grow over parts of the hull. Some of the weapon emplacements had been converted into nesting boxes for local birds at the suggestion of human children who thought the ship looked too scary. Dr. Chen pulled out her devices and began taking readings. Tell me, Commander, have you noticed that the more time your soldiers spend with our people, the worse your technology problems become? Zarthak thought about it. Yes, but I assumed that was coincidence. It is not coincidence. It is quantum mechanics. She showed him readings on her device. Your technology is designed around principles of dominance and control. Weapons that impose your will on others. Engines that force matter to behave according to your desires. Computers that process information through hierarchical command structures. Yes, that is how technology works. That is how your technology works. But consciousness affects quantum probability fields. When people interact with genuine kindness and mutual respect, they create localized areas where aggressive technology becomes increasingly unlikely to function properly. Zarthak stared at her. That is impossible. Is it? Your ships worked perfectly until you got close to our planet. They failed more dramatically the longer you stayed. And they fail most completely around the soldiers who have made human friends. The quantum field effect is cumulative and irreversible. Dr. Chen smiled at his confused expression. Commander, your people weaponized dominance and fear. We accidentally weaponized friendship. And friendship appears to be more powerful. That evening, Zarthak sat in his tent, staring at reports from his 3 ships. The flame of conquest could no longer start its engines at all. The Blood Drinker had lost all weapon functionality. The Death's Shadow was slowly being converted into what the humans called a cultural center. His soldiers were not prisoners. They could leave at any time, but they were choosing to stay, to help with human activities, to learn human customs. They were becoming less like conquering soldiers and more like immigrants. And the worst part was that they seemed happier than he had ever seen them. Outside his tent, he could hear human laughter mixed with draconian voices. Someone was playing a guitar while others sang along in both languages. The sound carried across the night air like a promise of something he had never believed possible. For the first time in his life, Commander Zarthak wondered if maybe, just maybe, there was a better way to live than conquest and war. 1 month after the crash, Zarthak received an urgent message from Draconian High Command. The message was transmitted through a special hyperspace communication device that the humans had helped repair, though it only worked for 30 minutes each day before shutting down again. Commander Zarthak, the voice of Supreme Admiral Korvash crackled through the speakers. Your mission status reports make no sense. Explain your current situation immediately. Zarthak looked around his command tent. On one wall was a map of Earth that human children had drawn for him, complete with pictures of flowers and smiling faces. On his desk was a coffee mug that said, World's Best Space Commander, given to him by Martha. Through the tent opening, he could see Lieutenant Vexara teaching a group of human teenagers how to speak basic Draconian while they taught her something called skateboarding. Sir, the situation is complicated, Zarthak replied. Complicated how? Are the humans using advanced weapons against you? Do they have allies we were not aware of? Are you under attack? No, sir. They are not attacking us. They are... Zarthak struggled to find the right words. They are being nice to us. The silence from the other end of the communication lasted, so long that Zarthak thought the device had broken again. Repeat that, Commander. The humans are treating us as guests, sir. They provide food, shelter, medical care, and entertainment. They have made no hostile moves against our forces. Then why have you not completed your mission? Destroy their cities and establish control. Sir, our weapons do not function. Our ships cannot fly. All of our technology fails when we try to use it aggressively. Another long silence. Commander, you will hold your position. A rescue fleet is being dispatched immediately. Do not let the humans corrupt your soldiers any further. The communication cut off, leaving Zarthak alone with his thoughts. That afternoon, Dr. Chen returned with more equipment and a team of human scientists. She had been studying the quantum effects around the crash sites for weeks and claimed to have made a breakthrough in understanding what was happening. Commander, I need to show you something, she said, leading him to a large truck filled with complex instruments. But first, let me ask you a question. In your culture, how do you view consciousness? The mind, the soul, whatever you call the thinking part of a being. Consciousness is individual, Zarthak replied. Each being has their own mind, separate from all others. That is where your people and mine differ most fundamentally. Dr. Chen activated her equipment and screens filled with colorful patterns and flowing data. Humans discovered something about consciousness that your people never learned. Individual minds are not actually separate. They are connected through quantum entanglement at the subatomic level. She pointed to one of the screens. Every time humans interact positively with others, every act of kindness, every moment of genuine care or friendship, it creates quantum resonance fields that connect consciousnesses together. The more people involved, the stronger the field becomes. I do not understand, Zarthak said. Your technology works by imposing the will of one consciousness over matter and energy. But when you enter a quantum field created by cooperative consciousness, that imposition becomes impossible. The field literally makes aggressive actions increasingly improbable. Dr. Chen walked over to another screen showing readings from around the crash sites. Look at this data. Every area where your soldiers have formed friendships with humans shows massive quantum coherence fields. The fields get stronger every day as the relationships deepen. Your weapons do not just malfunction in these areas, they become quantum, mechanically unable to cause harm. Zarthak studied the data. The patterns were unlike anything he had seen before. So you are saying that human friendship is actually a type of weapon? Not a weapon, the opposite of a weapon. It is a field that makes weapons impossible. Dr. Chen smiled. We did not develop this intentionally. It is just how human consciousness works when we are being our best selves. We create zones of cooperative reality around us. But why are my soldiers affected? They are not human. Consciousness is consciousness, regardless of species. When your people started genuinely caring about humans, started forming real friendships and connections, they began contributing to the field effect. They became part of the cooperative consciousness network. That evening, Zarthak walked through the crash site village, seeing it with new understanding. Everywhere he looked, humans and Draconians were working together, laughing together, sharing stories and experiences. And everywhere they were together, his instruments detected the strange quantum fields that Dr. Chen had described. He found Sergeant Mordak teaching a group of human children how to throw a baseball with proper form. The sergeant had always been one of his most disciplined soldiers, but now he wore a baseball cap backward and had learned to high-five the children when they made good throws. "Sergeant!" Zarthak called out. "Yes, sir." Mordak jogged over, leaving the children to practice with a human adult. "Do you want to leave this place? To return to the ship and our mission?" Mordak was quiet for a long moment. "Sir, I have been a soldier for 20 years. I have destroyed cities and killed thousands of beings. I thought that was what strength meant. But these humans, they show strength by building things instead of destroying them, by helping instead of hurting, by making friends instead of making enemies." "That does not answer my question. Sir, if you order me to leave, I will obey, but if you are asking what I want—" Mordak looked back at the children playing baseball. "I want to stay here and learn how to be strong in the way humans are strong. I want to build things instead of breaking them." Zarthak nodded and walked away, He asked the same question to a dozen other soldiers throughout the evening. The answers were all similar. They would obey orders, but given a choice, they wanted to stay. That night, Zarthak sat with Martha under their usual tree. She was working on a new knitting project, something she called a blanket for winter. "Martha," he said, "my people are coming to rescue us. 100 ships with weapons that could destroy this entire continent." "That sounds serious," she replied, not looking up from her knitting. "When they arrive, what will happen to them?" Martha smiled. "Same thing that happened to you, dear. We will offer them soup and ask if they need help with anything. But there will be 100,000 soldiers, all of them trained killers, all of them believing that humans are their enemies." "Well," Martha said, "I suppose we had better start making more soup then." Zarthak stared at her. This small, elderly human woman was completely unafraid of 100,000 alien warriors. She planned to face the most feared military force in the galaxy with soup and knitting needles. For the first time since arriving on Earth, Zarthak began to understand why his invasion had failed so completely. It was not that humans were stronger than Draconians, it was that they had redefined what strength meant, and somehow that redefinition was spreading through his soldiers like the most powerful virus in the universe, the virus of hope. The rescue fleet arrived 3 months after the original invasion. 100 Draconian warships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system, their weapons charged and ready for battle. Supreme Admiral Korvash commanded the fleet personally from his flagship, the Universe Crusher. Zarthak received the communication while sitting in what humans called the mayor's office of their improvised town. He had been meeting with local human leaders about expanding the settlement to accommodate more families who wanted to move closer to their Draconian friends. "Commander Zarthak, this is Admiral Korvash. We are here to extract your forces and complete the subjugation of this planet. Prepare your troops for immediate evacuation." Zarthak looked around the office. The walls were covered with children's drawings of humans and Draconians playing together. His desk had reports about the upcoming Harvest Festival, where his soldiers planned to compete in pie-eating contests. Through the window, he could see Private Kethvar teaching a group of elderly humans how to garden with Draconian techniques. "Admiral, the situation here is not what you expect," Zarthak replied. "I can see that from orbit, Commander. Your ships appear to be decorated with local vegetation and primitive artworks. Explain yourself." "Sir, the humans have not attacked us. They have welcomed us. Our soldiers have integrated into their communities. Many have formed permanent relationships here." "That is exactly what I was afraid of," Admiral Korvash said. "You have been compromised by enemy psychological warfare. We are beginning immediate atmospheric entry. Prepare for extraction in 6 hours." The communication ended, leaving Zarthak with a terrible choice. He could order his soldiers to prepare for evacuation, knowing that many would refuse and that it would mean returning to a life of conquest and war. Or he could try to protect the life they had built here, knowing that Admiral Korvash would interpret any resistance as treachery. The rescue fleet began its descent toward Earth's atmosphere, but as the ships approached the planet, the same thing that had happened to Zarthak's invasion began happening to them. Navigation systems flickered, weapon systems developed errors, communication arrays filled with static. By the time the first rescue ships reached the lower atmosphere, their technology was failing so badly that they were forced to make emergency landings across the planet. Some landed in deserts, others in forests, several in the middle of cities. Within hours, the mighty rescue fleet was scattered across Earth's surface, their ships as broken and powerless as the original invasion force. Admiral Korvash's flagship came down in a wheat field in Kansas, not far from where the Flame of Conquest had crashed months earlier. The Admiral emerged from his ship in full battle armor, carrying a personal plasma rifle and expecting to fight his way to Zarthak's position. Instead, he was met by a group of local farmers carrying sandwiches and cold drinks. "Welcome to Earth," said a cheerful human woman in overalls. "You folks look like you had a rough landing. We brought some food and water. Are any of your people hurt?" Admiral Korvash stared at the humans in complete bewilderment. He had expected resistance, fear, weapons, desperate attacks. Instead, he was being offered refreshments by farmers who acted like his crash landing was a minor inconvenience that neighbors should help with. "Where are your weapons?" he demanded. His plasma rifle trained on the group. "Oh, we don't need weapons," replied an elderly human man. "You're not really invading anymore, are you? You're just having spaceship trouble like your friends." "My friends?" "The crew from that other ship that came down a few months back. Nice folks. They've been helping with the harvest. Your timing is perfect, actually. We're having a barn raising next week and could use some strong backs." News of the rescue fleet's arrival spread quickly across the planet. Within days, every landing site was surrounded by humans offering assistance. Food trucks appeared. Medical tents were set up. Local mechanics volunteered to examine the broken Draconian technology. Admiral Korvash tried to maintain military discipline, but the same thing that had happened to Zarthak's forces began happening to his soldiers. The longer they stayed on Earth, the more the humans' kindness affected them. Weapon systems failed completely. Armor became too heavy to wear comfortably. Military protocols seemed increasingly pointless. 2 weeks after the rescue fleet's arrival, Zarthak received permission to visit Admiral Korvash. He found his superior officer sitting on the porch of a farmhouse, wearing human clothes and learning to play something called checkers with a 10-year-old human girl named Amy. "Admiral," Zarthak said, sitting down in a nearby rocking chair. "Commander," Korvash replied, not looking up from the game board. "I am beginning to understand your situation reports." "Sir?" "This planet is impossible." Korvash moved a red checker piece. "Their technology should not work. Friendship cannot be weaponized. Kindness cannot disable starships. Yet here we are." Amy made her move and jumped 3 of the Admiral's pieces. "Gotcha," she said happily. "How did you do that?" Korvash asked. "You weren't paying attention to what I was doing. You were only thinking about your own pieces," Amy explained. "That's why you lose. You have to think about the whole game, not just your part." Zarthak watched as understanding dawned in the Admiral's eyes. "Sir," Zarthak said quietly, "what are your orders?" Korvash was quiet for a long time, studying the checkerboard. "Commander, in my 40 years of service, I have conquered 63 worlds. I have commanded fleets that destroyed entire civilizations. I have been the instrument of the Empire's will across half the galaxy." "Yes, sir." "And in all that time, I have never seen soldiers as content as your troops are here. I have never seen warriors choose to lay down their weapons voluntarily. I have never seen strength that comes from building instead of destroying." Amy reset the checkerboard for another game. "Want to play again, Mr. Admiral? I'll teach you a better strategy." "Admiral," Zarthak pressed, "Draconian Command is expecting reports. They will send more fleets if we do not respond." "Then we will respond," Korvash said. "But not in the way they expect." That evening, Admiral Korvash sent a message to Draconian High Command that would change the course of galactic history. Using the few communication systems that still functioned, he transmitted a full report of the situation. On Earth, to Draconian Command. Mission status update. Earth has been successfully contacted and diplomatic relations established. The human species possesses technology that makes conventional conquest impossible. They have developed quantum consciousness, manipulation that neutralizes aggressive action through probability field manipulation. However, the humans have offered an alternative to conquest. They propose cultural and technological exchange. They are willing to share their consciousness technology with the Empire in return for peaceful cooperation. Initial trials show that this technology can enhance Draconian capabilities in non-military applications by several thousand%. Request permission to establish permanent diplomatic station on Earth for extended technology transfer negotiations. Recommend immediate cessation of all military operations against this system. The response came 3 days later. Permission granted. Establish permanent presence. Report progress monthly. Zarthak knew that Admiral Korvash had not told the complete truth in his report, but he had not lied either. The humans did possess incredible technology. They had just described it in terms that Draconian Command could understand and accept. Over the following months, the crashed Draconian ships were converted into the foundations of permanent settlements. The weapons were removed and the space used for schools, hospitals, and community centers. Former soldiers became farmers, teachers, mechanics, and artists. News of Earth's unique situation spread across the galaxy. Other species, hearing that, the mighty Draconian Empire had been peacefully neutralized, began sending their own ships to investigate. Each new arrival experienced the same effect. Their aggressive technology failed, their hostile intentions dissolved, and they found themselves welcomed into an ever-growing galactic community centered on Earth. Years later, Zarthak stood in the garden behind his small house, watching his grandson play with children from a dozen different species. The boy was half human, half draconian, and completely uninterested in conquest or war. He wanted to be a teacher when he grew up, just like his human grandmother Martha. The Death's Shadow still sat in its original crash site, but it looked nothing like a warship anymore. It had been converted into the galaxy's first interspecies cultural center. Children from across known space came to learn about cooperation, friendship, and the quantum mechanics of consciousness. Zarthak often sat on what had once been his ship's bridge, now a classroom where human teachers explained to young aliens that violence was not strength, that conquest was not victory, and that the greatest weapon in the universe was the decision to care about someone else. The galaxy had indeed been left speechless by the mysterious vanishing of the Draconian ship on Earth, but the silence was not one of fear or confusion. It was the quiet of a universe discovering for the first time in its history what peace actually felt like.